Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the FCC. Happy Monday. At least the sun is shining. My name is Tara Joseph. I'm president of the club and a journalist with Reuters. Before we get going, just a few house reminders. Please do switch your phones to silent. But now on to the age of creativity. And it's such a pleasure to have lunch with creative people. We've talked about many things today in terms of what is creativity and how can we embrace that in Hong Kong? I think it's no secret that the Hong Kong government is working quite hard to try and develop new industries away from basic financial services in this city that do embrace creativity, and it's frankly a pretty hard push to change the culture here. Jonathan Neelands has been in and out of Hong Kong. He spent some time teaching drama at the Hong Kong Academy. He is a professor of creativity, which must be a very pleasant thing most of the time. Joanna Hotung, many of you will know, is an educator, entrepreneur, focused on developing creativity in children in Hong Kong. She'll also make a few remarks, and we hope to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So let's start with Professor Neelands.
Well, thank you, Tara, and a huge honour to be asked to speak at the Foreign Correspondents Club. I got to sign the book. I can't tell you, it was worth coming from England just to sign that illustrious book, and also to be given a reporter's notebook. I mean, I feel as though I've been gifted already. So I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes and put the title, The Importance of Creative Industries and Creative Education in the Hong Kong Economy, in some context. Joanna's going to speak, and then it's over to the floor for question and answers. And obviously what I'm bringing is a UK perspective. I know Hong Kong well-ish, but not enough to talk in detail, obviously. So I'm hoping that what I draw out in the UK context is something that resonates here, and that we can look at the comparisons, similarities, and the differences. But I wanted to begin at the beginning, look, by putting this image up, which is of a young child's hand that was left in a cave in Lascaux in France, something like 120,000 years ago. And it is to me a reminder that since the dawn of time, humankind has been creative in at least two senses. In terms of the mark as an emblem of art, we've been creative in the sense that we've needed since the dawn of time to express ourselves, to make our mark on the world, and in doing that, to understand and respond to the marks that others have made. But also creative in the sense that we have used since the dawn of time our human ingenuity and skill to improve our lives and to transform the world. We are creative in both those senses, and what I find interesting about our current age is that those two senses of the arts as a form of expression and creativity as a form of entrepreneurialism, ambition, invention and innovation are very closely placed together again. What I'm going to talk about came out of a report that came from the Warwick Commission at the University of Warwick in England in 2015. I put it up so we can look at the title, Enriching Britain, Culture, Creativity and Growth. And these terms were used very carefully. So enriching both in improving the quality of life, improving the quality of society, the importance of culture and arts in our life, but also enriching because we believe there are strong economic benefits from culture and creativity being placed together in an industrial context. And in the same sense, growth, both growth of culture at grassroots level, but also the growth of cultural industries, the growth of cultural organisations. And we did this at a very timely time because the creative industries in England were really beginning to take off. And of course, England is not the only country that's championing the creative industries. As well as nations, there are a number of global cities. So if we take Hong Kong, Shanghai, and London, we can see that all three of these cities are placing a great deal of faith in a future based in the economic benefits and cultural benefits of the creative industries. If you look at Hong Kong, something like 5% of the 5.5% of the working population is employed in the creative industries in one way or another. 7.4% in Shanghai, and up to 12% in London. So all three cities pursuing those goals, although obviously in quite different ways. And it's worth a lot of money. The creative industries in England last year in 2014, the last year that we have figures available, was worth something like 930 billion Hong Kong dollars, representing 5.2% of the total UK economy, and it's growing at nearly twice the rate of the industrial base in other areas. So it's huge, huge for us, the contribution that it makes and the faith that we now put in it to be our economic saviour. The English economist Gerard Lyons has made the argument that in the future, any successful economy will need one of the three C's. They'll either need cash, well, financial crisis took that out, commodities, well, no one's buying oil anymore, or creativity. So it's definitely a nation that's seen creativity as being the route to having a successful economy. If we make some comparisons, you can see that in the UK, the amount of GVA between 2009 and 2013 increased by something like 34%, and its contribution to the GVA at 14%. In the same period, in Hong Kong, there's 67% growth in the GVA of the creative industries to the local economy, and a 27.5% growth in employment. So both in a global city like Hong Kong, a nation like England, still focused in London, another global city, but increasingly dispersed across the country, huge, huge growth, can't be ignored. I won't bother too much with this, but obviously we define our creative industries in different ways, but essentially what we're talking about are industries which depend upon ideation, production, dissemination and consumption of ideas, of intellectual property. So in this sense, IP has become the new oil. So the ability to have a younger generation that has the imagination, that has the skills, that has the knowledge, that has the experience to be able to generate ideas which may be of great value, both economically and culturally, has become a major objective for modern economies. The Warwick report made some principal findings. The first was to consider the creative industries as a very fluid ecosystem. So some critics will say, well, how can you put museums and galleries together with IT and software and together with public publishing? Some of those industries are highly successful, the others require large amounts of public investment in order to survive. What is this grouping about? And what we suggested was that there is a massive flow of talent, ideas, money that flows across and between the creative industries. So there might be an actor trained at the public purse, performing at the Royal Shakespeare Company, which has large amounts of public investment, but also working in TV and film, also working in advertising, also possibly involved in marketing. Technicians trained at the public purse, but now making some of the world's box office selling best films. So our argument was that there is a gentle flow, but it's a gentle flow that requires both private and public money for it to be successful. And in terms of the UK, our point was that although the garden is flourishing, it's blossoming, it's blooming, are we doing enough to nurture the roots? Are we doing enough to feed the roots? Because if we don't, the garden will flourish and wither. And the principal finding of the report came down to education. This was a piece that appeared in The Guardian the day after the launch, which dramatically, front page, arts and culture being systematically removed from the UK's education system. So what we realised with all of this faith and hope in the success of the creative industries and the importance of arts, culture and creativity working together, we were not providing that at school level. We still have a school system which is pretty well based on the assumption that what we should be doing is putting yesterday's knowledge in tomorrow's minds. And that's true to a certain point. You can't think outside the box unless you know the box. But it's not really geared to the idea that the future might require a different set of skills, and particularly a different portfolio of skills. And we'll talk about it in a moment, but a portfolio of skills that would include technology, science, but also arts and design in order to equip the workers that we need in the future. And we are still a nation that requires children to make a choice between being an artist and being a scientist at 13 years of age. And we know one of the reasons why we have so few girls and young women choosing sciences is because they have to give up the arts at 13 if that's what they want to do. So what we reported on was significant drops in the number of students taking design and technology, which is an absolutely core skill, core area of knowledge for anybody who's hoping to be a creative. A massive drop in the amount of drama, and again, the kind of levels of social confidence and social intelligence that students studying drama, again increasingly important in the creative workforce. Has been a significant increase in media-related subjects, but overall a massive decline, and perhaps even more worrying, if we look at this data, this is the percentage of children who engage regularly with the arts, not just in school but also at home. And what you will see is some dramatic drops in the number of young children engaging with arts activities. And it's a double whammy for some of our children, because our most disadvantaged children are unlikely to get the arts in the curriculum, and they may not have parents who can either afford or access the arts as part of their home life and their home education. So they're doubly disadvantaged in that way. So we're facing the danger of a whole generation of children who will have had no experience in the arts, will have had no background in design and technology, either at home or in the workplace, in the school. So what we're arguing for, like many nations, or pressure groups within many nations, is not for a STEM curriculum, science, technology and maths, but a STEAM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, arts and maths. Because of course STEM are essential for our survival, but the arts make it worthwhile doing so. And it's not, and there's a plus there as well, because it's not enough just to add the arts in. You know, for the future, the creative workforce of the future will need a combination of these subjects where there is much more interdisciplinarity and crossover between subjects than we've seen in the past. It's just as important for us to have creative artists and cultured economists as it is artists who understand the affordances of technology. But many school systems are still rooted in subject silos and in making choices, and if you do this, you can't do that, and you're not going to go to a great university like Warwick unless you do these subjects and not those subjects. And that mindset needs to change, and it's slower, it's happening more slowly than the creative economy is progressing and advancing and becoming clear about what it wants and what it needs. It's also a plus because it's very important that all our young children develop a sense of enterprise, of ambition, of self-confidence, of ability to work with others. These are the key skills and areas that any creative education needs to provide. Another problem, because of the lack of access to the arts for our children, is that it affects, of course, the consumers of arts. So another finding from the Warwick Commission was that if we look at the publicly invested arts, that's the arts that we all pay for through taxes and through lottery, the wealthiest, better educated and least ethnically diverse 8% of the population forms the most culturally active segment. So we've got an increasingly narrowing group of people who engage in the arts regularly. And they therefore benefit disproportionately from the money that goes into the public support public purse in order to support those. If you couple together the narrowing down of audiences with the limiting of arts and creative education opportunities in school, you end up with a situation where only a small group of people start to have the ideas and produce the art and the creativity that we require. So in the background, some of you will recognize a picture of Downton Abbey. And we're getting really good at dramas like Downton Abbey because our actors lived in places like Downton Abbey, our writers lived in places like Downton Abbey, and so did our directors. And the warning that we made is that unless you intervene culturally, unless you intervene through education, whole swathes of human experience will not find their story, will not be told. We will be poorer for it. If you lose Paul McCartney, you also lose Eleanor Rigby. And we also know that economically, creativity is driven by diversity. If you put the same people in a room, they'll come up with the same things. You put people in a room who are different, and then they'll start to fire and charge and create creative ideas. So this is a huge challenge for us nationally, to have the success we have with the creative industries, and yet be failing our young children, preparing them for a future in which they can fully engage, unless they've been privately educated or come from a certain social, economic background. I'll skip that. Well, it's a nice picture of the Royal Shakespeare Company. It was going to say something about ensemble work and how artists who don't own creativity often model for us highly creative ways of working, high levels of social intelligence, moving around in cramped and difficult surroundings. You know, they become the exemplar of the creative worker, particularly in the UK's imagination, I think. So in closing, I just wanted to look at, you know, if we're becoming a creative nation, what are the pillars? What are the pillars of that? It's very, very important to have heritage assets and arts, which you have, and lively engagement and participation in those heritage assets and arts. It's where we come from. It's where our inspiration comes from. It's where our ideas come from. It's important to recognise our cultural DNA, and different nations will have different kinds of DNA. But it's important to the success of the UK creative industries that we're a very dissenting, difficult, critical, challenging people, and that comes out in our creativity, I think. Diversity is crucial, and a population that's STEAM educated, crucial. Talent pipelines, identifying, as Joanna does, young people who have the capacity and the talent to rise to the top and be high achieving creatives from across the population is absolutely essential. Some access to finance will always need to be public investment through tax incentives or through other kinds of subsidies in order to keep the most vulnerable roots of the creative industries alive. And finally, a real entrepreneurial spirit and know-how. And in the background is a picture that you may recognise from the London 2012 Cultural Olympiad, where I think for many people in the UK it was the first time that we realised how important creativity had been in binding our artistic nation together, but also our engineers, our inventors, our scientists, our other creatives. You know, it's a whole piece that we need to look at. So I'm going to stop there and give Joanna a chance to have a word, and then we're very happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Jonathan. Very, very interesting. We're totally on the same wavelength, which is great. As Jonathan said, I work with young people developing creativity. And the way that I approach the importance of creativity is through three main areas. One is as a parent, second is as an educator, and the third is as a business owner. And I'm hopefully I can connect with all of you in at least one of those areas. And I'm often asked, is it difficult working with so many young children? And the answer to that is absolutely not. Children are born naturally creative. They're born naturally wanting to explore their surroundings and try out all sorts of new things. Many of you will have seen the best-selling TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson about how education trains children not to be creative. But actually, the children are not the difficulty. The difficulty are the parents, and I include myself in this group. I am a parent. So I start with parents because so often it's we as parents who are actually removing that sense of creativity from our children. The reason we're doing that more than ever now is because we have never been so involved in our children's lives as we are now. When I graduated from university, my parents really let me walk my own path as to what I wanted to do. It is a very different world. It's a very competitive world, and that's why we as parents are so much more involved. We worry about our children. We don't want our children to fail or to have difficulties, so we tend to mollycoddle them. But by doing that, we're actually removing the opportunity for them to fail. And you can't be creative, you can't be innovative unless you've actually failed and had to work something out for yourself and not have your parents work it out for you. Also, we hear a lot about schools, about the schools in Hong Kong particularly being too, you have to memorize things, they're too formulaic, etc. Honestly, a lot of that pressure comes from the parents. Parents are scared also of being too different from other parents. There's a lot of peer pressure involved in being a parent. And you see that a lot in Hong Kong, where the parents are putting pressure on the schools to give more homework. And the parents see for their children a better future by walking down a narrow path. They're actually closing off their future rather than opening up their future, which I think is very, very important. Moving on to being an educator, then, we have to recognize that the world is changing very, very quickly. For those of you who have very young children, honestly, we have no idea in 20 years' time what jobs they will be doing. Even if you have teenagers now, we really don't know what jobs they will be doing. I've seen statistics that say, 20 years from now, 60% of the jobs that will be out there have not even been invented yet. We have no idea. When I graduated from university, I could not be a web designer. I could not be a stylist. I could not be an environmental engineer. These jobs just were not invented. I didn't have that option. We don't even know what jobs are out there. So it's more important than ever that we actually open our children's minds as parents and as educators. And then as a business owner, 98% of the businesses in Hong Kong are SMEs. That's 98%. And in fact, SMEs employ 46% of the workforce. And I can tell you, as a business owner, by the time you've been squeezed by your landlord into paying your rent, you can't afford to carry any passengers in your staff. Every one of your staff members has got to be firing on all cylinders. We just don't have that ability, that flexibility. We just cannot do that economically. So what that means is you actually need people who have very, very good general skills. They have a good basic education, but they're also able to think. They're also able to innovate. And, again, as a business owner, I feel nowadays the pace has stepped up so far. I've been owning my own businesses for 20 years. But in the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I feel like I have to reinvent myself every year. It really is. The pace of business changes so quickly. And we need young people, we need to employ people who are actually able to participate in this kind of conversation, who can actually bring ideas to the table. So on balance, I think in Hong Kong, particularly in Hong Kong, we do have a wonderful base of young people. They are hardworking, incredibly hardworking. They want to do well. They want to achieve. What we need to do, though, is give them the tools, give them the ability to actually think more for themselves, actually challenge them more, give them more ways in their education of actually trying to solve problems, think more critically, fail sometimes without their parents charging in to protect them and rescue them from situations that might go wrong. I think if we can actually do that, that's where the future lies. Thank you.
Who would like to start? Okay, I'm always happy to kick things off. I was really interested. Two things struck me about your presentation, Professor Neelands. The first was this notion of STEAM. And I've heard a lot about STEM. I hadn't heard a lot about STEAM. Already being a specialist in science or engineering or math is a huge demand. Is it realistic to be good at both or to nurture both, especially in a competitive world?
I don't know, it's not so much about being good at both, it's about the influence of both. If you're going to be an engineer employed in the future, you need to do something which a machine can't do better, and what a machine can't do better is the human ingenuity and skill. So you're going to be a better engineer if you've got a strong background in design, a better engineer if you have an imagination that's been stimulated through the arts. We ask children to narrow down the areas of learning just at a point in history when we need to be expanding it if we're going to get the full range of human potential.
So should it be a requirement for engineers to take creativity classes, or can you force creativity on people?
I think there's a popular assumption that scientists and engineers are not necessarily creative. And what we know is that the 37 Nobel laureate 37% of all the engineers who got Nobel laureates play the violin. And I think we forget that there are creative scientists and there are cultured economists and there are artists who understand technology, but it's about making that a choice for everyone, I think.
Thank you. Question over here.
Thank you. Hello. I'd just like to comment on that, if I may. It sounds like an advert, but I'm from the British Council. And over the last year, the three major arts events that we've had here have been Anthony Gormley, Thomas Heatherwick, and Conrad Shawcross, who are associated. Now, all of them are in the creative arts, if you like, in different ways, but all of them equally apply science in a quite serious way to the stuff they're doing. So all I want to do is support what you say by some recent examples.
Thanks. We have a question over here.
Hi, Pauline Taylor. I can relate to Joanna as a small business owner. And I wonder if you could comment on how you would advise our government to help small business owners employ more young people with creativity, because we fight all these things that you say every day as well.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think I'd just like to start by saying creativity can be taught, but it's also something you nurture from the very beginning, from when children are very, very young. And I think where we need to start is inquiry-based education. Get children to ask a lot more questions, and that needs to go all the way through. So then when we're employing young people, we're actually employing people who are wanting to learn more, who are wanting to ask more questions. The government has started. It's making little steps into at least talking about this. Recently I was part of an initiative organised by the MTR organisation together with the Hong Kong Council for Social Service, called Pathways to Employment. And this is really about how do we all work together, business, government, the NGOs, etc. How do we work together to actually prepare young people to work in our companies, and are they the right people for our companies? Because we also don't want to be, as I said, we can't employ people who aren't useful as well. So how do we actually all work together to create the right people through the education system and then make them valuable employees? This is a conversation that's really only just started.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right from an educational point of view. I just wanted to look at the financial support. The most creativity, as Joanna said, there will be market failures. You know, not every good idea is going to work. And the difficulty for creative SMEs is finding investors at the early stage of risk, you know, finding anyone who's going to put the money in. And one thing the UK government's done, which I think has been quite successful, is to introduce tax incentives to help with that. So if you're an SME in IT or in tech, you can claim back all of your R&D expenses against tax. And there are other protections and financial bursaries available to companies to help them with that early stage development when private investors are unlikely to want to put their money in.
I just wonder, though, we're talking about help from the government, we're talking about parents and schools that nurture children and creativity. But Joanna, you also mentioned this idea of letting people fail. And I know when I started off in journalism, it really was a pay your dues environment of learning. And you did have to fail, and you really had to, I'm not harping back to what I think was a better time, but I'm wondering if you think we've become too kind of nice about how we develop creativity, etc. I mean, do we need to be tougher?
Definitely. I do think we need to be tougher. I mean, as I said, I started off by saying parents, we're mollycoddling our children too much. I do think we are, and I'm just as guilty as a lot of other parents here. We're so worried about our children feeling sad about something, but actually you have to experience all the emotions. You have to do well and you have to do badly, you know, and I think we have to get over ourselves and allow them to do that, because truly, you know, it's the parents first, and then it's the schools, isn't it? That's the way it should be. But I notice as an educator how many parents actually push the child into the school and expect the school to solve the problem. You know, oh, my child is really badly behaved, please sort him out. Actually, that's a parent's job. You know, oh, my child doesn't know any manners, please sort him out. That's a parent's job, etc. So you're right, I do think we need to be tougher, and I think the world is much tougher. Again, when I graduated, I knew I could get a job because I had a degree. Now, if you have a degree, it really doesn't mean very much. You know, it doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily have a job. So yes, I do think we need to be tougher.
So any tough questions out there? We'll start back.
Yeah, Corinne Vignal. I'm just wondering which nations you would see are models as being creative nations, or who are the good creative nations? Or is it just down to more sort of some government initiatives in some places, or some private initiatives?
Well, I think that there are many nations across the globe now, but I think it's global cities that are really pushing the agenda. You know, Shanghai, Hong Kong, New York, London, Sydney. These are all cities that see their future and see themselves as hubs, almost independently. In the case of London, from the rest of the nations, it's very much driven by urban culture, urban networks. Richard Florida famously said that creatives cluster where there's tolerance, talent, and technology, and you're more likely to find that in a global city than you are in other kinds of cities. And I think, we were talking before we started, we're obviously from the UK, we're going to be living through a difficult week of historical change. And I think there's a general sense across the world that it is only now through our own human creativity and innovation that we can save ourselves and save the planet, that we have to do things differently. We have to see new ways of doing things. We have to live a more sustainable life. And in order to do that, there is no test or check boxes that you can mark. It's down to human ingenuity and skill to make that happen.
I think,
Sorry, no.
I was just going to add to that. I think also when we talk about creativity, we tend to get a bit obsessed with the latest IPO in Silicon Valley. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about grassroots creativity. The person with the corner shop, and sales are down because no one's going to their corner shop. How can I improve my business? That's creativity. That's problem solving. That's what we're really talking about. That's what most of us experience in our lives. And I think it's really keeping that level of ability to think wide open. I think that's what's really important.
Question over here.
Peter de Grassel, what importance in the cultural context does creativity play in the political sphere? In the British context, historically in Britain and Hong Kong, and contemporarily with Brexit that you just alluded to, and the past recent Scottish referendum, but in the Hong Kong context, the upcoming LegCo election and CE election next year.
There's one of those journalist questions.
Hey, we got to be tough.
Well, I want to answer that in two ways. I think, to put it bluntly, whether Shanghai can artificially create creative and cultural hub, I'm not sure. In the UK context, there's no doubt that as I said in my talk, some of that flourishing is to do with a society that's traditionally encouraged dissent, criticality, protest and opposition. That makes your mind think differently, challenge the rules and find new ways of doing it. So if you don't have that tradition, I'm not sure how that works. I'm sure it can, but I'm not sure how that works. There's a reason why global cities have championed the creative industries, because they see themselves as being global. And what we're facing in Europe, as you know, is a fragmentation, an atomization, that we're retreating within our boundaries. We're retreating into a little Englander mindset, or the possibility of that. It can't be good for us, it can't be good for the world, it can't be good for the Europe. Thinking creatively at a political sense is about how do we share the planet together? How do we best live in order to reduce the inequalities that are there and sustain the planet that we live in? And if you retreat into your own backyard, terrifying.
Hello, I'm actually teaching landscape architecture at Hong Kong U, and I have a sort of two-pronged question. One is, what relationship does our natural heritage have? I'm thinking about how many young people are not as immersed in the natural world as they used to be, certainly in my generation, or don't seem to be. Which I think does toughen you up a bit, and it does broaden your view. At the same time, generally young people who are coming into tertiary education now are the first generation who have no idea what a world is like without a smartphone, without a little screen in their hands. And do you think that that sort of technology has narrowed people's creative instincts, or narrowed their abilities, or is it an opportunity to widen them?
Well, we both want to.
So that's for everybody.
Well, maybe I'll start and then
I'm going to tweet this bit out. Yeah.
I think with the smartphone thing, I think it hugely valuable. All the digital stuff that's happening is hugely valuable. I think we have to recognise that, and if you don't, you have to get over it because it's here to stay and it's going to be changing very quickly. I think though we have to remember it's a tool. As Jonathan said, they're never going to replace human brains. I really don't think that level of creativity that humans bring to a task will not be replaced by smartphones, etc. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when they first said that you could take your calculator into your maths O-level, and there was a huge hoo-ha then. But, you know, actually, when you think about it, so much of the knowledge that's taught in school you have to memorise previously because you couldn't find the information easily. Now you can Google anything in 2 seconds. So I think there's a lot of the stuff that goes on in schools actually doesn't need to be in schools because you can get the information, facts, etc., fairly easily. We should be devoting more time to actually, as you say, interacting more with our natural environment, solving more problems, doing more case studies, thinking more.
Technology is not a choice. I mean, it's taken somebody of my generation quite a long time to fully get my head around it. And I think it's only when somebody explained to me that, you know, went from steam to electricity to technology, and the transformation effects of technology are as great as the transformation effects of steam and of electricity. It's just everything. It's not a choice, and you can't be outside of it. But what you can do is to grow young people to be clever, imaginative with it, to use it to both make money, but also to improve the quality of people's lives and the planet. You know, we have to stop thinking about it as something that is separate to the world and start seeing it completely fashions it now, as a principal source of energy. But also that as we go forward, it will change. So we're less likely to see new iPods and iPads and whatever. What we are likely to see is greater and greater everyday use of technology, across the whole piece. And that's why it's so important that young people have a creative, imaginative, playful education, but also understand technology and how to make best use of it.
Julia Ebb from Project Artistic. I just noticed my question is actually a follow-up on what just talked about technology. When we mentioned about STEAM and acting art to STEM, whether there were any actions or any among educators to promote more crossovers of subjects. For example, like in our organization, we work with, we try to have a project on high-tech art, but then we don't have enough scientists or physicists to help us out. So if in science subject, for example, in secondary or primary education, that they can actually promote the creativity, the artistic aspect during these subjects would be great. On the other hand, we work with local artists who they have been in the art field because they have to pick either science or art, so they don't have a lot of science background. So at some point we noticed that it's difficult for them to say move on to different media because they don't know about the chemistry or the physics behind that type of media. So, and at the same time also we work with artists that don't have much business sense. So I think these kind of things, that if they're crossover subjects of different expertise, they won't just be in their own field, but also will help in the creativity of innovation of art or their own field as well.
Thanks. Any more questions? Question from the floor? Right here.
I think it's a question to both of you. You talked about cultural DNA, and you also talked about wearing the hat of an educator. As a parent, in terms of if you're looking to build a creative nation, what would be the baby steps you would look at? I mean, what would be the kind of behaviors that you would expect to see from a child in order to move in that direction? Would you be able to spell out a couple of those behaviors that you used to cross?
I think the first thing to do would be try not to put all your aspirations into your child. We all do it. I wish I was a ballerina, therefore I make my child learn ballet. But I think that's really, allow your child to be who they're going to be. You know, give them as good an education as you can, but allow them to follow their own interests. Allow them to explore. Give them time. Give them time to explore. I don't think children should be overscheduled. I don't think children should be forced down a certain path. Oh, you know, you'll thank me one day that you can play the piano, that you can speak 3 languages and blah, blah, blah. I actually think, yes, you have certain guideposts and you nurture them, but you actually allow them their own time to develop into who they are, and you try not to interfere too much in that process. I think that's one thing. And also you teach your children that the world is a tough place. You win some, you lose some. You feel sad, you feel happy. This is the world we live in. You know, the world that we currently live in is there are no losers in schools now. Everyone gets a medal. Everyone did a fantastic job. Really, this is the way that the world is going. But it's not like that. They're going to get a really nasty shock when they actually go out into the workforce. You know, either at university or when they get their first job, they're going to have a nasty shock if that's the way that they've been brought up. So I really wouldn't do that.
I think play is really important. We're still uncomfortable talking about the serious value of play, but there's no doubt that creatives, whatever discipline they are in, are playful people. So I think not just free play, allowing our children to play without our guidance, but structured play, where we help them understand about risk and that risk leads to failure, but you know, we can rebuild the house of cards and try again, and you know, and the enjoyment that comes from that, make the play more progressively more challenging, use it as a form of developing critical problem solving. Be a parent who enjoys being in dialogue with the child, where the child doesn't expect to only listen but to speak and to be responded to. And crucially, to make sure that every opportunity they can engage in their heritage, in the living arts, not just of their own kind, but of other people, and that they have opportunities to work and be with children who are different. Those would be the key planks for me.
Very interesting. Thought-provoking way to start the week. Thank you very much, John Neelands, Joanna Hotung. We have a small gift from the FCC.
Oh, I thought the reporter's notebook was enough.
But please do take the notebooks away, and we hope you'll come back and see us again soon.